Hello. It is so good to be here. I'm super honored, honestly, to be kicking off LeadDev New York 2024. What an honor. Today, I'm going to be talking with you all about the Scrappy scale mindset, which is a very simple framework for managing how you should show up in any situation as a leader. We're going to be unpacking why versatility is so important for leaders who want to create clarity. And honestly, I'm so excited to be talking about this topic because I have been working on this talk for 2 years. I submitted this topic, the Scrappy scale mindset, to the call for proposals for LeadDev West Coast 2023. That talk was accepted. I was ecstatic. And then I immediately had a crisis of confidence. And my imposter syndrome kicked in, and I was really scared of getting up on stage and being seen as a fraud. So, luckily, the LeadDev organizers are incredibly gracious. They allowed me to switch topics at the last minute, which is not what I recommend doing generally. But last year, I gave a talk I really loved that was all about the overlap in roles between news reporters and engineering leaders, because I think the job is fundamentally the same. As engineering leaders, it's our job to create clarity for the people around us. And we need to create clarity in a variety of situations, both planned and unplanned. And that's where the overlap with journalists comes in, because journalists excel at creating clarity in breaking news situations. Now, in that talk, I mentioned that journalists cultivate different modes for handling different types of news situations. And I suggested that engineering leaders could do the same, and I mentioned that Scrappy and Scale were the name of my modes. Now, after the talk, in the office hours and in LinkedIn messages I received, multiple people were like, "Melissa, we loved your talk, it so resonated. The one thing I'm going to take away is the idea of a Scrappy mode and a Scale mode." And I was like, God damn it. The talk idea was good enough all along. So I came back, I did the whole thing again. I submitted through the CFP, it was accepted, and this time, when my imposter syndrome kicked in, I persevered, and I got the talk written, and I'm so excited to be here sharing it with you today, because ultimately, I care a lot about versatility. I learned how to be really versatile by working in newsrooms, and I think that it is the secret to my success as an engineering leader over the last 10 years. So when we say it is an engineering manager's role to create clarity for their team, what we really mean, what we're really saying, is that it is an engineering manager's job to respond well in any context. And there's a reason we don't say that, because that honestly sounds much harder than creating clarity, which is a lovely soundbite. But the reality is that that is what we are expected to be able to do. So let's visualize it. When your team is operating, it is operating within a specific context. And that context is both global, it's the moment in time, the economic context, but then also much more, regional and local. It's the organizational context, the team dynamics. And we can envision that these contexts exist on a spectrum from moments of complete stability to moments of complete instability or crisis. And we are expected to be able to handle situations on either end and at every point throughout this spectrum. Now, if your brain is like mine, it immediately looks at this and is like, well, that's infinite possible contexts. How could we possibly handle that? And the problem is that the skills required to create clarity in the moments of stability are very different from the leadership skills required to create clarity in the moments of instability. And these contexts are so different that a leader who wants to be effective and who wants to create clarity needs to cultivate a broad range of leadership skills in order to respond well. The problem is that most of us do not do this. We do not cultivate a wide range of leadership skills. We cultivate a very narrow range of skills to handle the situations that we're exposed to on a regular, recurring basis. And that's not bad. These things become our strengths. But it's dangerous because over a long enough time period working with your team, you are guaranteed to encounter situations that fall outside of your comfort zone. And in those situations, if you don't have the skills to be able to handle the situation, we will fall back on our strengths, even if they are the complete wrong set of skills to leverage in that situation. And that's where versatility comes in. In the leadership sense, versatility is the ability to read and respond to change in your organization with a wide range of complementary skills and behaviors. So when you are versatile, it means that you have cultivated the skills to be able to navigate multiple types of situations. And if that sounds kind of academic, it is. That's the definition according to Roberts, Kaiser, and Kaplan in the MIT Sloan Management Review in 2003 in their article, Developing Versatile Leadership. And the fact that this was published more than 20 years ago is actually why I had my original crisis of confidence in this topic. 20 years. Surely everyone has thought about this and mastered it. Maybe I'm the one who's behind. But the fact that they published a follow-up article in HBR in 2023 suggesting that only 10% of leaders are truly versatile, that makes me think that maybe this is the kind of thing that sounds really obvious, but is actually really hard to master. To build versatility, you have to be exposed to a very broad range of situations outside of your comfort zone, which unfortunately are, by definition, going to be uncomfortable. And even if we do expose ourselves to a range of situations that we're not comfortable in, we can't just practice versatility. That's because versatility is a meta competency, and that means that it only emerges as a skill in the presence of other skills. So when you build a toolbox wide enough to handle all of these different situations and you build the ability to pick and choose which skills you apply, that is versatility. But that's very hard, and I wanted an easier, more simple way to gauge how I should show up in every situation. And that's how I came up with the Scrappy scale mindset. The Scrappy scale mindset is a two-part framework for reading and responding to change in your teams. And it's based on everything I've observed about leading engineering teams over the last several years. Each mode is comprised of two parts: the context in which your team is operating, and the way that you need to respond as a leader based on that context. I think these modes are common to all engineering teams. At least they've been common on the engineering teams that I have observed. Most teams will find themselves operating in one of these two contexts most of the time, and you will often see teams switching between these contexts at the drop of a hat. So this is going to be helpful for us, though, because two contexts to be aware of is significantly less than infinite context. That's just math. But it's going to be helpful especially because if you can determine what mode your team is in, then you can determine how you need to show up. So before we define them and get into it, I want to clarify that neither of these modes is good or bad. They just are. This is reality. They exist, and when we accept reality, when we accept that our teams are operating in context, then we can shape how we respond. So it's very easy to remember. Essentially, there's a mode that your team is in when things are going right, and there's a mode that they're in when things are going wrong. So we'll start with the scale context. Scale contexts are characterized by stability or relative stability. And I don't mean necessarily technical stability of your application. I mean stability in the organization and in the team. So scale contexts are situations in which your team is able to operate autonomously without major constraints. They're allowed to organize themselves to make progress toward their goals without significant pressure from the outside or intervention. So a few examples of things that I have observed that represent scale contexts. Scale teams typically have a long-term roadmap or pipeline of projects that's planned in advance, or they have a long-term vision for what they're building that the team buys into. They're also given the ability to scope things and estimate them and build them according to the best practice. So in these cases, teams are not beholden to outside or abstract deadlines. Scale mode teams are often also fully staffed, so they're not spending a significant time interviewing and hiring and onboarding. For me personally, in order to be in a scale mode as a leader, I know that I also need the right technical ICs around me. I know enough to be technical, but I'm at the point in my career where I'm not going to be the technical subject matter expert on many of the teams that I lead. So I need those subject matter experts around me to inform my decision making. So when your team is operating in a scale context, when they are in scale mode, you can see how clarity might mean creating the conditions for people to flourish and grow, en route to shipping or fulfilling the team objective. And maybe you don't see your team described here. Fear not, I think Scrappy mode is where you will see yourself. Scrappy contexts are situations, suffice to say, oh, my watch thinks I'm working out. Scrappy contexts are situations in which things are not going right for your team. And I don't mean they are going morally right. I mean just the conditions are constraining or impairing the team in some way. So unlike scale context, characterized by stability, Scrappy contexts are characterized by instability. So your team might be in Scrappy mode if you do have a roadmap, but you also have a new CEO who came in and steamrolled it with their new objective. Your team might be in Scrappy mode if they are understaffed or you're missing key subject matter experts, or maybe you're the sole technical expert on a team that's otherwise relatively junior. Maybe as a manager, you are constantly breaking new ground, either technically or interpersonally. Trying anything new for the first time, I think, is inherently a little bit scrappy. So as you can see, these represent two very different contexts in which a team needs to operate. And neither context is good or bad. They just exist kind of in opposition to each other. And because a team will find itself in both contexts over a long enough period of time, even the most stable team will experience something that constrains them or forces them into a Scrappy mode. They need one leader who can do both, operate and create clarity in scale mode as well as Scrappy. So to respond well as leaders, it is our job to cultivate these yin and yang skill sets, which are opposing but complementary leadership skills, two different ways of responding to different situations. A team in scale mode needs a leader who is able to think strategically and articulate the long-term vision and remind people what they're buying into. Since we can assume teams in scale mode are relatively stable, we can also focus on creating repeatable processes that empower the people around us. So typically the skill set that I employ when I'm in scale mode is one of enabling leadership, coaching, empowering, mentoring, and growing. And that is very different from the skill set I employ when my team is in Scrappy mode. When my team is in Scrappy mode, I give myself permission to stop getting buy-in and consensus in my decision-making. I have to focus on getting things done, not on creating stretch opportunities or enforcing process. So I have to make decisions in a different way. So when my team is in Scrappy mode, I shift as well into a mode where I act much more decisively and communicate much more aggressively, which would not fit on the slide. I communicate much more aggressively to set the immediate next steps and create implementation clarity for the team. So if we zoom out, what we end up with here is a 2x2 set of quadrants with the context of our team that we want to read and monitor on top, and the corresponding ways that we as leaders will respond when our team is in either of those contexts. So when I apply this in my daily work, I use it to help inform and guide my responses. I use it to make sure that my efforts as a leader align with what will actually create clarity for my team. I think this is a really important note about sustainability and burnout. The periods of when I have been most burned out have been the periods where I've been working the hardest to create clarity, and it's just not working. It's just not having the effect I want. And it's often because I am creating clarity in one mode when my team is actually working in the other. So, we know that versatility is key to becoming an effective manager. We have to learn to be good in different types of situations, which means being able to switch between our Scrappy mode and our Scale mode at will. Luckily, this is a thing you can learn how to do. Unfortunately, taking a picture of this slide, which is lovely, will not do it. If you want to apply the Scrappy Scale mindset in your work, I think there are 3 steps: reflect, read, and respond. So the first thing that you're going to do if you want to apply this, you are going to literally go home and book an hour with yourself and identify how you aspire to show up in different situations. Don't just take my definitions of Scrappy and Scale and try to apply them in your organization. Figure out what they look like for you. Then, identify the specific actions and behaviors you aspire to take in those circumstances. To do this, take a picture of the slide. Take a piece of paper, fold it hot dog and hamburger style. Make quadrants. In the top 2 quadrants, write out the specific contexts or situations your team encounters that fall into that category. Then in the lower 2 quadrants, identify the behaviors and actions that you personally aspire to take when your team is in that mode. It's okay to be aspirational here, because this is going to help us identify where we are weakest. The reality check comes next, because once you've finished filling out your quadrants, you're going to go back through and circle the leadership skills where you feel you struggle. That does take a lot of self-awareness, so you can also go and ask your peers, your colleagues, your team. Ask them to help you identify your strengths and the skills that you still need to build. That feels probably super vulnerable, but remember that what's at stake is literally your effectiveness as a leader. So although you cannot practice versatility, you can practice the lower level skills that are required to create clarity in either mode. And the key to building skills is repetition. So let's say you do this exercise and you identify that a particular Scrappy context for your team is that, I don't know, hypothetically, production goes down. And maybe you identify that you need to be really good at executing steps under pressure. That's great. Circle that as a weakness. Then go build those skills. The wrong time to build the skill of being good under pressure is the next time production goes down. If you want to go and be good under pressure, go take a cooking class. Find a way to build the skills that you need in order to show up well when you do encounter those situations at work. So once you've done this exercise and you've identified your personal Scrappy and scale mode, you've basically identified your personal barometer for showing up. And the next step is applying it. So we want to build the habit of reading and assessing situations, and I like to practice this in low-stakes context first. You can do this before meetings, like team syncs or one-on-ones, and just ask yourself, do I need to be in Scrappy mode or scale mode right now? You can also use it as an exercise to start your day or end your day. What mode or what is the context my team is in today? What mode will they be in? What mode do I need to be in? If you do it at the end of the day, you can ask, what mode was my team in today? Did I correctly assess the context? Were my responses aligned with that? However you do it, the goal is to gain reps reading different contexts for your organization and team. When you start doing this regularly and mindfully, you will start to notice those moments when context starts to change or shift. These are your leading indicators that it's time to shift as well. Ideally, we want to be shifting into the mode in the direction of the team before the team itself gets there, so that we're not trying to scramble and create clarity after everyone is already confused. To do this, to be able to shift modes, it takes a lot of practice. My advice is that when you see or observe that the context is shifting, maybe you're in a meeting and someone throws out, like, what if we had this live next week? And your boss is like, yeah. That's your sign to shift modes. Maybe you see a new bug come in and you're like, well, that's just going to be a P0. That's going to be a problem. Again, this is your signal to shift modes in the same direction. Those two examples are shifting from scale to Scrappy, but it is also equally likely that your team will be shifting out of Scrappy mode and into a scale context. So if you notice that, you're going to take a moment to pause and observe the shift. And I know mindfulness, I hate it, but it really does help. So you're going to take a moment to pause, observe the shift, and name the mode that you need to be in. And in that moment, you're just going to remind yourself how you want to show up. And it doesn't need to be a long moment. It's not like we're going off and hiding in a conference or in a huddle room and trying to come up with exactly what we're going to do. It's just in the moment that it takes to go, oh, this thing that's happening is a sign that I need to shift more into scale mode. And when you do this, when you practice this over the course of your career, you position yourself to respond more mindfully and thoughtfully in a way that is going to give you a much better chance of actually creating clarity for your team based on the context they're in. Now, this is a career-long endeavor, so I recommend getting started. Again, you won't be able to practice versatility, but as you build the skills and you add them to your toolbox, you will also build the ability to choose between the different skills and apply them in different situations. All right, so that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here. There are so many amazing and talented speakers to come. It's a real honor to be kicking things off. You can find me in office hours at the first break, or you can follow me, my ideas, and my writing on medium.com/@mdepuydt. Thank you so much.